Hey guys, it's Ken from Cactus Jam Board Games. Today we're going to be talking about World Order and specifically round overview and scoring. So pull up a chair, join me at the table, and I'll see you on the other side. The first step of the preparation phase is to draw cards. So we're going to go to our draw deck and we're going to draw up to our hand limit, which is typically 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Got our 6 cards that we can play with this round. Then we're going to reveal country cards in each region on the board. So we're going to go over to the main board. Okay, the second thing that we do in the preparation phase is reveal country cards, and I've got 3 examples right here. For Pacific Asia, we're just going to take the top card, bring it on over. For South Asia, do the same. You can notice Africa, this side of the deck is empty, so presumably we've gone through all these cards already. I'm just going to go ahead and shuffle them up, set one over here, and move it like that. So every region of the board should have 2 country cards. Next, we're going to determine turn order. We're going to start with the player with the least amount of victory points. That player determines where they want to go in the turn order. They can choose any of the locations that are here. There's reasons to go first, and there's also reasons to go last. Let's say Russia, in this example, chooses last place. Then we're going to look at the 2 countries that are tied, China and the US. The player with the least amount of money gets to choose first. Say China wants to go first. US decides to go second. Well, Europe gets to choose last. There's only one spot anyways, so they choose a spot here in this example. Once turn order has been determined, then each player will produce their primary resources. Those are the ones at the top of the board, including energy, ore, and food. Go ahead and produce those up to the production limit. Remember, there's no cost, you just do it. So in this example, 1 energy, 2 ore, and then 3 food. And Europe is done in this example. After each player produces primary resources, in turn order, players will choose focus. There are 3 choices: domestic, diplomatic, or military. This is their focus marker. At the beginning of the game, everyone starts in the domestic focus section, but starting around 2, each player will be able to guide their game by choosing focus. The first thing that happens when you choose focus, so let's say we decide to stay with domestic focus in the example, we're going to ready 2 country cards. So we're going to go to our allies. Any cards, up to 2 cards can be turned over from the exhausted state to the ready state. Then, if we choose domestic focus, you can spend 7 money to increase the production of any of the production values here, as long as you can. So for example, you could spend 7 money, increase the energy production by 1, so now next round or every round thereafter, you'll produce 2 energy instead of 1. Probably not the best move for Europe, but that's just the example that I gave. Once we're done with that, then the European player, because they chose domestic focus, can produce consumer goods and services. Oh, I should mention this. Anytime you increase production of the primary goods or resources, you get that immediately. So if we did use this example of increasing, spending the 7 to increase energy by 1 step, we would get an immediate bump of 1 more energy. Okay, so I got that covered. Then once you're done boosting production levels of one of your goods, then you can produce either consumer goods or services, and then spend the appropriate resources and produce those goods. As a final benefit of the domestic focus, you gain 2 for research action when you take the research action at the end of the round. So in contrast, if we chose the diplomatic focus, we would ready 5 country cards, and we have the ability to spend 7 money to boost up the production level of diplomacy. Works the same way over here. You'd spend the money, bump this up 1 level. Then you can produce diplomacy up to your maximum, in this case 5, for 3 money each. Now for diplomacy can only be capped, or is capped at 10. You cannot exceed it. However, if you boost up any of your other resources to beyond 10, you'll actually score money for that, or get money from that from the bank. And please remember, if you choose diplomatic focus, anytime you engage, you pay 2 diplomacy less for each engagement action. One thing to note is, before you have to choose which focus you want to choose, and this is true for any of these, you get to see the cards that are going to be in your hand, and you get to see all the country cards as well. So the game is definitely giving you a lot of information to allow you to determine what you want to do and how to best maximize your turn. Okay, lastly, we could also choose a military focus on a turn. In this example, the European Union would flip over 3 of their exhausted allies. They could spend 7 money to bump up production level of their armored units. Then they can produce them up to their maximum, in this case 4, based on the resources they have. Probably not the best move, because they can only produce 3 tanks this round. So it'd probably be better not to spend the money, keep it at 3, produce the 3, add those to the top of the board. The military focus also gives you a special ability when you are resolving threats, which we'll talk about later in this video. And what that means is whenever you do a threat, you have an extra 1 point of threat in those regions where you have armored units. And then you also have any regions where your interest markers are indicated, you get 1 defense on top of it. Okay, so let's talk about taking the research action. We have just finished the first round of play. These are the 4 cards that we've played here. We have them set up here so we can kind of keep track of how many cards we've played. These are the remaining cards in our hand, and you can see that, well, again, these are the cards that we have not played. This is our draw deck, our resources, allies, everything else is on the board as we left when we finished this first round. And so during the research phase, the first thing that happens is you take the remaining 2 cards in your hand and you take the resources that are shown at the top here in the middle of the card on the left-hand side. So in this example, we would get 6 money from the bank and 1 diplomacy. Let's go ahead and take the 1 diplomacy, and then we would take the 6 money as well. Then below here, we've got this magnifying glass. This is your research points that are awarded to you to purchase cards in the asset card market found at the bottom of the board. So we have 2 for each one of these cards, grand total of 4, plus, because we're in domestic focus, we get an additional 2. So we have 6 that we can spend in that market. Let's go ahead and take a look at the market right now and get some cards. Okay, so here's the market shown here. There are always going to be 6 face-up cards here. Anytime a card is drawn from the deck, from this market, slide all the cards to the right and bring another card out. So again, these are our 2 cards that we have. We have 2 research points here and 2 here, grand total of 4, plus, because we're in domestic focus, we get an additional 2 to spend in this market. The cost for the cards are shown here on the right hand side, anywhere from, in this example, 3 all the way up to 7. I think the highest I've ever seen is 8, and I think the lowest is 3 or 2. So we have 6 to spend. We can spend it in any way, shape, or form, meaning we could spend it on this card right here, draw another one and see what we get, and go from there. In addition to the cards that we have and the fact that we're in domestic focus, we have an additional 2 research points. We can also exhaust cards in our allied cards. What I mean is we can exhaust any one of these cards here for their power, getting that many more research points. So if we exhausted Canada, we get an additional 2. You don't have to choose to exhaust them right now. You can exhaust them as the cards come into the market and you figure you need more. So let's go ahead and purchase some cards. We have 6. Now, one thing to note about these cards is that they have the basic actions on them. So for example, this card says improve relations with a country on the board, which we saw earlier or in another video. Then you can invest in it or you can trade. So it actually gives you double action. It kind of indicates that right here. You've got the 2 different actions, the diplomacy and the economic symbols. So these cards are quite nice. Now, this one is pretty expensive, cost of 7. It would blow through all of our resources that we have to purchase cards. Because we have 6 to begin with, we would have to exhaust one of our cards. I think it's worth it. Let's go ahead and do that. Get this card right here. When you purchase a card from the market, again, these cards are going to slide over. You're going to draw a replacement card, and now this one is available for purchase as well. But let's take this card back to our player board. So now we're back at our player board. This is our brand new card. We're going to take this card and we're going to place it at the top of our draw deck, which means we're guaranteed to see this card next round. Okay. Now, if we purchase another card, it would go on top of that one. And as long as you're purchasing cards, they just keep going here, meaning that you'll always see the cards you purchase in play the next round. So once you're done with the research phase, you're going to collect up all your cards, the 4 cards you played, plus the 2 that you used for research this round. And these are going to go into your discard pile and face up over here. You won't get access to these cards again until you draw up here and you run out of cards in this deck. So at the beginning of next round, you're going to draw up 6 new cards. 1 more. That's our 6 cards. If you need to draw another card, you draw from here. Once you're out of this deck right here, then you're going to go ahead and shuffle up your discards and then deal those out. During the return on investment phase, each player will look at the allied country cards that have FDI tokens on them. They're going to multiply 2 times the country strength in each case. For this example, the European Union player will score 4 money from the bank or get 4 money from the bank for having an FDI token on Canada. During the increased prosperity phase, you're going to look at your marker. Look at how many consumer goods you need to go up to the next level. In this example, you need 2. Well, you have 4, you got plenty. You can only go up 1 step when you do it, but when you do, you spend the 2 consumer goods. You go up to the next level, you're going to score 2 victory points and get 10 money from the bank. And then you're set. So that's the increased prosperity phase. When we resolve threats on the board, we're going to look at each region independently, starting with, again, left-hand side, moving to the right, and from top to bottom. In this example, we're going to look to see if there are any military units in a zone. In this example, there are none in the Americas, so we can skip it. Let's go over to Europe. Okay, so in Europe, we see that there are military units here, so we need to resolve the threat. We're going to look at the region itself. We're going to see what flags are there. They represent the countries that have an interest in that zone. What that means is they need to protect it from their opponents. The US and Europe are allies, so they never threaten one another. So if there's a US flag here, it's never threatened by a European tank and vice versa. However, Russian tanks or military units are a threat to the other countries. So to resolve a threat, you're going to look at the number of military units in a zone that are in opposition to another player. So in this example, the US is threatened by this 1 tank here. The consequence of the US being unprotected, meaning it doesn't have a tank to cancel it out, so it's just a 1-to-1 ratio. Every tank that your opponent has, you have to counter it with 1 tank. So in an example where you can't counter the threat, you lose 2 victory points during this phase. So US would go down 2 victory points. Europe can counter the threat. So they do have an interest here. They can counter the threat, so they don't have a problem. Russia also have to counter a threat. Well, they have 1 military unit versus the 1 military unit. They're fine. US has no presence, so they're no threat as well. So let's go on to the next zone. In the Middle East, we see that Russia has 2 military units. The US has 1. Europe has no military units, but it does have an engagement token. So an engagement token here can actually act as a defensive unit. But let's talk about first. Let's just cover the armored units first. So all 3 countries have an interest in this region, meaning all 3 could be threatened and lose victory points if they can't counter threats. Russia comes in with 2 tanks. The US only has 1, meaning the US takes another hit of 2 victory points because they're unable to counter the threat. European Union, on the other hand, has an engagement token. They don't have any military unit, but they get 1 defensive point. They can counter 1 military unit for every ally they have in this region. Now, looking at the board right now, I can see that they only have 1, so that's insufficient to counter the threat. So in this example, Russia would be able to knock 2 points, or European Union would lose 2 victory points. However, if Europe did have a second ally in the region, in the Middle East, they could burn this engagement token, get rid of it, and in the place of losing 2 victory points, just lose this marker. In Africa, we see that European Union is the only country that is an interest in this region. So if any other country has an armored unit there, except for the US, European Union will lose victory points unless they can counter it. In this example, they don't have the ability to counter it, so China causes European Union to lose 2 victory points. In Central Asia, again, Russia's got 2 armored units, China's only 1. Both countries have interest here, both need to counter threats. So in this example, China will lose 2 victory points because China has a lead of 2-1. In South Asia, China has an interest here. Unfortunately for China, they're threatened both by the US Army tank and the Russian Army tank, meaning they're going to lose 4 victory points, 2 for each. Okay, and then finally in East Asia, both the US and China have interest in this region, meaning they have to defend against threats. European Union threatens China, but not the US. China needs to have a counter of 2. They only have 1, so they're going to lose 2 victory points. US also loses 2 because China has presence and they have nothing. In rounds 3 and 6, we're going to score. We just finished round 3. Let's go ahead and score the board. Each of the sections are scored independently. So we're going to start in this example from left to right and then from top to bottom. So we're going to go to each section in turn. We'll start with the Americas, where we see that the top section above the dotted line, all the cubes are present. So you can see the dotted line here. So we have the permanent section filled out. We can score this region. When you score a region, you're just going to count up the number of cubes to determine who's got majority. In this example, the US has 3, European Union has 2, and China has 1. This is a simple scoring. The US has majority here, so they'll score 1 victory point for each cube. That's 3 plus 7 for the scoring bonus for first place, for a grand total of 10 points. European Union will score 2 points for 2 cubes plus second place, total of 6. And then finally, China will score 1 point for their 1 cube plus 2 for a grand total of 3. Moving on to Europe, we see that the permanent section is not filled out. All the cubes are not present. We have an empty space here, which means we just ignore this region. We don't even look at the number of cubes. So moving on to the next section, we go to the Middle East, where we see that the permanent section is filled out, so we can score this region. So I'm going to count up majority. We have 3 US, 3 Russian cubes, 2 European, and 1 Chinese. And then we have a neutral player as well. Okay, when you have tied number of cubes, the tiebreaker is the number of military units in that zone or in that region. In this example, Russia has 2 compared to 1 for the US. Russia has the majority then. They're going to score 3, 1 for each cube, plus their bonus of 10, so 13 points. The US will score 3, plus 7 or 10 points. European Union will score 2, plus 4, 6 points. And then finally, China in this example is tied with the neutral player. When 2 players are tied, and the players are tied because neither one has military units here, they go down to the next level. So in this example, Russia is first, US is second, Europe is third, no one is fourth. Both China and the neutral player are fifth, while there is no scoring for the 5th players, so China scores nothing. Moving on to Africa, permanent region is filled out. We will score. In this example, Europe has the majority with 2. 7 plus 2, 9. China has 1, 5 points. The tank here plays no role because there's no tie, so we just focus on the cubes. Moving on to Central Asia, Russia has 2, China has 2. Again, we've got a tie. We've got to go to the armored units. Again, Russia has the majority, so they're going to score 2, plus 8, 10. China will score 2, plus 4, 6. On to South Asia. Here, Russia has 2, US has 2, tied. US has an armored unit or a military unit, and so does Russia. It's a true tie, so both players, instead of scoring the majority, will score the next level down. So Russia's going to score 2 plus 5, 7. US will also score 2 plus 5 and 7. Unfortunately, again for China, this is the second time this has happened, poor guy, they've tied with the neutral player for 4th place in this example, and they're not going to score anything here. Okay, in the final region, this is East Asia Pacific, China has a clear majority with 4, plus 9, 13, 2 plus 6 for the US, or a grand total of 8. And then finally, European Union gets 2 plus 1, grand total of 3. Then finally for scoring, we're going to look at who has the most money. First player will score 5, second 3, third place 1. Ties are shared at the next lower level. Then we look at military units on the board, most, second place, third. Again, ties are scored to the next lower level. So if 2 players are tied for first place, they both score 3 points each. And then lastly, we look at the number of allied cards that the player has in front of them. It doesn't matter if they're exhausted or not, just count them up. And improve relations with a card that you already have. So 2 cards stacked on top of each other count as 1 country. First player gets 7, second 4, third place 2. Okay guys, in this video we covered the concepts of round overview, went through all of the different steps, and we also covered scoring in rounds 3 and 6. I think we've got it all covered with all the videos now. This will be the last in the series for World Order. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. I think at this point we've got about 95 to 99% of the rules covered. There are a few minor things here and there, but those are things that we can pick up when we're actually playing the game. So again, thanks so much for watching. Really appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye now.